Hey, my name's Luke from Truce Designs, and I just wanted to show you guys how I make a shopper bag. So it's the simplest one that I make. It's just 3 panels, and I'll just show you like a quick little breakdown of how the pattern gets made. I use this cutting paper as pattern paper. It's got little squares at every inch. So if you wanted to make a shopper style bag yourself, just figure out what side profile you want it to have. In this case, I rounded these bottom edges to make it easier to sew around, but you can really do whatever shape. And you measure with a tailor's tape around the edge of it. So I just go around and make sure you get all the little curves, that kind of stuff. So you just go around, measure how long it is, and then make your center panel piece to that length so that the seams match up. So I've already done that for this shopper, so I won't show you guys how I would draw it out on this pattern and make little adjustments and that kind of thing, but I can do that later if there's interest. So I've already cut out all my pieces for this one. I've got this center piece here, and then 2 pieces of sailcloth that'll be either side. Then I've also started doing these little interior hanging pockets for your phone and your keys. So super simple, just 1 piece of fabric folded, not quite all the way in half to let this top part stick into the seam and let you still access the pocket. And then 2 handles, and then the labels. So yeah, let's go stitch it up. So the order of operations in making 3-dimensional things is pretty important. You want to make sure to add any items, pieces onto it before it's turned 3-dimensional. It makes it a lot easier to stitch it on. So first thing I'm going to do is add this truce label. The next flat thing that I'll put on here is this hanging pocket and this Made in USA tag. It's good to just tack all these things down so they don't get caught in the wrong way or just put sideways. So the next step is you want your outside face against your outside face, and just go all the way around. And make sure that you back tack at the beginning here to make sure it doesn't just rip apart when you put a little bit of pressure on it. Go a little carefully, a little slower around the curves. And if your pattern or your cut wasn't just perfect, you have a little extra, that's okay. Better than having not enough. And so the same thing for this 3rd panel. For me, I have curves on the bottom and straight at the top, so it makes it pretty easy to figure out which side is the top and which side is the bottom. Same thing, back tack. And down and around. All right, so now I've got the basic shape. I trim up any little bits and get ready to take it over to the binding machine. I probably don't have a binding machine at home, but a lot of home sewing machines you can buy little attachment plates that will fold binding tape, and that's what I would recommend instead of doing it by hand. So the next step for this design is to add this binding tape all the way around the inside of the bag. right. So now I'll bring it back over to my main machine here to attach the handles. Now there's tons of ways to attach handles for these shoppers. I just like to fold the binding tape over and tack this guy down here. And then you all want to make sure there's no twists in it, so you run your hand along it and then tack it down to the other side with this binding tape pointing in the same direction. So that's one handle. I'll take it over here to the second side. Get that tacked down. Sometimes it doesn't cut the bottom thread. Again, run my hand around it to make sure there's no twists. And I will tack it down with that binding tape facing the same way. And at this point, I'll come through with scissors and cut off everything that's poking out. Any little stragglers or anything, get rid of those guys. And if it came out a little bit wonky, you can kind of just make it work out here. So yeah, good. The binding tape's not going to get caught on that. Not going to get caught on that. And now we're ready to put binding tape around the top of it and close off all these raw edges. I'm going to run binding tape around the top of the bag, and again, if you can get a little attachment like this one for a home machine, it's definitely easier than trying to fold it by hand and do it that way. But if you are going to fold it by hand, I recommend using an iron and a ruler. I like to clean up this binding tape that didn't get stitched down, so it's kind of flush, so it makes it a little easier when we get back to it. There's a few different ways to finish binding tape as well. This machine doesn't have a reverse on it because it's really old, so I like to just trim it and then take it over to the hot knife and melt that down, which you could also do with a lighter. You just have to be more careful to not burn the fabric. A lighter and a little piece of metal to swoop it down once it's melted. So because of the way I've attached these handles on the inside here, not just on the outside, they would just floop down all the time. If I didn't come on this heavier machine so that I'm not breaking needles and tack it down like this. So just come in here, do a little tack back and forth. This isn't the most structurally important part, but it does help keep the handles facing up. So that's the main reason for this step here. And it might be hard on a home sewing machine. You might be running into some problems going in reverse over these kinds of layers. So maybe don't feel like you have to do this step, because if I was using my other machine, I would be breaking the needle, and my sewing machine repair guy would just be mad at me for using the wrong machine for the wrong task. Thankfully, I have this walking foot machine, so this thing is a beast. Alright, so once I trim all those little extra thready guys out of there, now the handles stand up nicely. Alright, and pretty much the finishing step on this particular bag is to take this hot knife and just melt the end of the binding tape down so that it's not going to fray, not going to come off anywhere. Be careful if you have one of these hot knives. I've cut myself with it before, and it was probably the most painful experience that I've had against myself, if that makes sense. It cauterizes instantly. So yeah, there we go. It's all closed up. The hot knife made this a nice clean-ish finish. And we can flip it right side out now after all that. And we've got ourselves a simple little shopper bag. So again, this is a really simple pattern and construction. If any of you already make stuff, this is probably not going to be all that instructional. But if you like the how it's made kind of vibe from me, let me know, and we can make some DOP kits or even get into a little more specifics of how I prototype stuff and how I make the backpacks. Thanks for watching.